at it. Okay. Loading. There we go. All right, we are streaming on YouTube. We are going to learn a little bit about this holiday that is in our past. So Passover is, at least 10 years ago, was the holiday that was most celebrated of all the Jewish holidays. So 70% of Jews usually attend a Passover Seder. That's a lot, right? Especially knowing how many Jews don't go to synagogue each week, right? 11% of Jews attend synagogue each week. That is not very many, right? But 70% of Jews usually attend a Passover Seder. I know growing up in a family that was pretty secular, that was the highlight of our year, was the Passover Seder. So knowing what you know about Passover, why do you think that Passover is so different? What makes Passover so unique?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
That's okay.
I mean, I feel like it marks a very significant event in history. The reminder of the power of God. And yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful thing to consider and remember.
Right.
Historically.
Right. Historically, it's very powerful, but also pedagogically, it's the Passover Seder, that big meal that we have on the first and second nights of Passover is very has all these different elements in it. So it's when you're going through the Passover Seder, you can put a lot of different experiences in there. There's the food experience, there's the singing experience, there's the storytelling. It's thematically stuff that we still need to think about. What is freedom? What do we do with the freedom that we have? Right? It's a holiday that is centered around teaching our children. And so we engage all of our senses. It's a very multi-sensory holiday. We'll learn a little bit about that. And I think towards the end of today, we're going to go through the Passover Seder and not go through an entire Seder because I don't have any extra food here. I just ate my lunch, but go through what it would be to go through a Passover Seder. So this is from our Haggadah. Do you know what a Haggadah is?
I'm familiar with the word, but I'm not remembering what it is.
So the Haggadah is the prayer book that we use on Passover, or not just on Passover, but at the Passover Seder. There's this wonderful line. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Adonai, our God, not our good, our God took us out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. Had not the Holy One taken our ancestors out from Egypt, know that we and our children and our grandchildren would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. And even if we were all scholars, sages, or elders, even if we knew all of the Torah, it would still be a requirement for us to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And all who expand on the story of going out from Egypt, this is praiseworthy. So the whole point of the Passover Seder is telling that story again and again and again. Why do you think telling this story is so important?
It reinforces the power of God. It reinforces that God brought freedom, brought us out of Egypt.
Great. And we need to be reminded of that again and again. Like any moment from history, to prevent history from repeating itself, or to learn from the positive parts of history, the being set free, we have to relearn and relearn again.
Well, and there's a supernatural element to it. It reinforces the power of God that God was more powerful than the Pharaoh. God was more powerful than the people, and still was able to guide them to freedom.
Right. Right. So just to review the timeline of the Exodus story. So how does the Exodus story begin? And we've got some hints here.
I guess
Actually, let me
new
ask
king
you,
arose.
are you familiar with how familiar do you feel like you are with the Exodus story?
Vaguely familiar, not
Vaguely,
familiar to where I could just tell the story, but it's
right.
like bits and pieces are
So
I remember.
I'll start from the beginning of the story, and after each section, I'll pause and see if there's anything that you can insert that I missed, or if you
Okay.
have any questions about that part of the story. So in the book of Exodus, the book of Exodus starts with kind of a retelling of at the very end of Joseph, or at the end of Genesis. Joseph is the second in command in Egypt, and he brings his whole family over to Egypt. So that's how the Jews get to, not the Jews, the Hebrews, the children of Israel, or really the children of Jacob. That's how we get to Egypt. And people love Joseph. Everybody loves Joseph. But then enough generations go by that they forget about Joseph. So that's where we get from Exodus that a new king arose over Egypt, one who did not remember Joseph. And the Israelites are prospering. They're all shepherds. They're prospering. And so there are too many of them. So we have Exodus 1:13, ruthlessly the Egyptians made life bitter for them with harsh labor. But even with that, the Israelites are having more and more and more children. And so Pharaoh says, all right, midwives, you got to kill all the babies once the Hebrew babies once they're born. And Shifra and Puah, two of the midwives, say, up, the Israelites are just, the Israelite women, the Hebrew women are just too strong. Unclear whether Shifra and Puah are Israelite or Egyptian, but they refuse to kill the babies. And whether it is that the Hebrew women are just too strong, or whether it is that these that Shifra and Puah have that kind of inner strength themselves, they saved these male children that they were commanded to kill. And so the Torah says Shifra and Puah were blessed with big houses. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything I'm missing from this first bit? All right. Okay. Then we get this story of Moses. So Moses, we skipped we skipped everything about how Moses was born. So Moses, after the midwives, Pharaoh realizes that, well, can't kill the baby boys that way. So he commands for all of the baby boys who are born to be thrown into the Nile River. And Moses's mother refuses, and instead she hides him away. But once he gets too old to hide away, she puts him in a basket, floats him down the river. Pharaoh's daughter finds him and raises him. Now,
how ironic.
Exactly.
How ironic.
Right. It's this river that's supposed to be the place of death becomes this place of safety instead. And Miriam, Pharaoh's sister, or not Pharaoh's sister, Moses's sister is walking around the Nile, walking along the Nile, following the baby to make sure that he's okay. And she actually makes sure, we don't hear this part of the story very often, but she actually talks to Pharaoh's daughter and says, you know, wouldn't it be great to have a Hebrew nurse for the child? And so makes sure that Moses's mother is able to actually nurse him and raise him. So fast forward, Moses grows up, he sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and then he strikes down the Egyptian. He then flees to Midian because he just killed an Egyptian taskmaster. Mm-hmm. And then he finds God. So let's watch the video where he finds God. Have you seen Prince of Egypt before?
It's been a while.
It's been a while. This the representation here is actually pretty true to the text and incorporates a little bit of midrash, incorporates a little bit of commentary, Jewish commentary into there too. So let's watch. Oops, if it lets us. Nope. Nope. Here, we'll do it this way. So Moses is a shepherd in Midian.
Here I am. Take the sandals from your feet. The place on which you stand is holy ground. Who are you? I am that I am. I don't understand. I am the God of your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What do you want with me? I have seen the oppression of my people in Egypt and have heard their cry. So I have come down to deliver them out of slavery and bring them to a good land. A land flowing with milk and honey. And so unto Pharaoh I shall send you. Me? Who am I to lead these people? They'll never believe me. They won't even listen. I shall teach you what to say. Let my people go. But I was their enemy. I was the prince of Egypt, the son of the man who slaughtered their children. You've chosen the wrong messenger. How can I even speak to these people? Who made man's mouth? Who made the deaf, the mute, the seeing, or the blind? Did not I? Now go! I speak with you when you go to the king of Egypt. The Pharaoh will not listen. So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders. Take the staff in your hand, Moses. With it, you shall do my wonders. I shall be with you, Moses. Moses.
All right. The couple of things that are a little bit different about this telling. One is is when Moses protests. Here he's the prince of Egypt. In the Torah text, it's that he's a man of slow of speech, slow of tongue. And so God proposes that his brother Aaron comes and acts as his mouthpiece.
Mhm.
That's the big difference. But other than that, it quotes the Torah text itself. And you were talking a little bit about this, earlier, right? This exact scene. Right? Who are you? I am what I am. It's your responsibility to find out. So it's our responsibility to find out. Right? Anything to add or questions about this part of the story? Okay. So Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh and 10 times ask to let my people go. And 10 times God, when Pharaoh says no, God retaliates with these 10 plagues. Also, it says in the Torah text, what's really interesting, good for another class, is that Pharaoh hardens his heart, the first few plagues, and then the last few plagues, God hardens Pharaoh's heart. So the big question is, why does God harden Pharaoh's heart when the whole point is letting the people go? So that's a big discussion for another time. But this last plague, the death of the firstborn, leads to the first real commandment of the Jewish people. It really leads to the creation of the Israelites as a people, as a formal people with formal laws. So this the last commandment, with this last plague, God says, time to make a calendar. Your calendar starts now. And with this calendar, you're going to celebrate your first holiday. You're going to make a Pesach offering. So you're going to offer lamb. And you're going to put the blood of the lamb on your doorposts so that we know that, that your firstborn are not going to be killed. And this Pesach offering was made annually from then on, or was supposed to be made annually from then on. It started again when they got to Egypt, or not Egypt, when they got to the land of Israel. But but this was the very first commandment. It was the Israelites taking on their very first responsibility as a people. They're no longer slaves to Pharaoh. They're now slaves to God. And of course, people are going to be pretty upset when they wake up and see that their firstborn are dead. And so the Israelites have to leave very quickly. They take their dough before it's leavened. And they go up from Egypt. There's this quote in Exodus 12 that a mixed multitude went up with them. So keep in mind that it's not just the people who had been born from Israel and his family, Jacob and his family, but others came too. And they are just as much, they become part of the Hebrews. They become part of the Israelites. We have, once they go up, after Pharaoh says, fine, leave, Pharaoh changes his mind and brings his army to come chase them. And then this next scene happens. Oops.
With the staff you shall do my wonders.
We cross through the Red Sea, pass through the Red Sea, and then our journey has just begun. Right? Passing through the Red Sea is a wonderful thing. The sea crashes. Sea crashes in after the Egyptians try to follow us. And every Saturday morning, really every morning, if you daven, if you say the morning prayers every morning, we reenact this song, this scene at the sea. This song of the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, rather. It's not really the Red Sea. And we say in our Haggadah, in our Passover Seder, that in every generation, a person is obligated to see themselves as if they personally left Egypt. So what might that mean, a person seeing themselves as if they personally left Egypt?
For me, that has a lot of deep meaning. Because I consider, like, when I went through a lot of spiritual warfare and turmoil that I didn't understand, I feel like that was Egypt, or I was leaving Egypt, and I felt like my eyes were open to a lot of things. So I mean, I feel that very strongly, hard for me to put words to. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about that, but
There's
I
the
guess it's,
personal spirituality of it,
yeah, yeah,
that sometimes we feel trapped, and we remember every day, we remember either if we're in a period of feeling trapped, we remember that we have been set free, or that we have been set free before, we can be set free again. When we're on a day when we feel free already, we remember we've been in that place before. Let's have gratitude for the freedom that we have now.
yeah.
And Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim comes from the same root as the Hebrew word for straits, for the narrow places. And so being set free from Egypt also means being set free from those narrow places, seeing things a little bit wider and a little bit broader.
Liberation.
Exactly. And so there's the personal, but also there's the worldly, right? That we have gone through slavery before, so we must have compassion for those who are not in a place of freedom yet.
Yes. Okay.
And so Passover gives us a chance to go over what's going on in the world, who needs a little bit more freedom.
I have a question for clarity
Mhm.
about the babies who were spared because the blood of the lamb was on the doorpost. Is that, were the Egyptians going to the homes and actually killing the babies, but they passed over the homes that had the blood? Or was it a literal supernatural killing of,
Right? It's a supernatural. God, an angel of God, or the angel of death is kind of going from door to door.
okay.
So it's supernatural. They all wake up, and we can hear there are cries throughout Egypt.
Mm.
Exactly. So moving on to something completely different. When we learned about holidays, we learned that that in the Torah text, it says that we don't eat chametz on Passover. We don't have chametz in our homes. We don't find it in our homes. We don't cook with it. We don't eat it. Chametz literally means leavened. In Jewish law, we've expanded that meaning. So on Passover, traditionally, we don't eat what we call chametz. So chametz means foods made from wheat, barley, oats, spelt, or rye. Those are all grains that can leaven, and they're also the 5 grains that are mentioned in the Torah. Right? On Passover, we are prohibited to own or eat or benefit from these. So there's a big, long process of getting rid of all of these grains from our houses, searching our houses, making sure we don't have them in our houses. And if it's too expensive, like let's say that we've got some really expensive whiskey, then there are processes to kind of set that aside. But for the most part, we try to make sure that there's none anywhere. We do intense, deep spring cleaning to make sure that we don't even have crumbs around. So chametz is one category of food. Many Jews also don't eat kitniot. Kitniot are additional grains and legumes that we don't, that Ashkenazi Jews, so European Jews, many of them at least, also don't eat on Passover, because there's a lot of similarity between those grains and chametz. So, for example, rice, soy, lentils, etc. Questions about chametz and kitniot?
And that is symbolic of how the Israelites had to flee, and they brought the unleavened bread with them because
Exactly.
they had to flee. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Also that certain sacrifices require unleavened bread in the temple, and there's some connection with that too. Just for review, what is a food that you can think of that might be chametz? That might not be okay to eat on Passover?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
All right,
Um,
so chametz is this stuff. So
Okay.
what's a food that you would eat regularly?
Well, I'm considering, like, I do no carbs a lot, so
Okay.
well, I mean, I guess just any type of bread you might, I
Mhm.
guess, make a sandwich with or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
I ate oatmeal for breakfast. Oatmeal's chametz,
okay.
right?
So you would clean that out of your house prior to Passover.
Exactly. So I'll just say the food that I ate the last couple days. So oatmeal, obviously that's chametz. I had for dinner, I had shakshuka, which is basically tomato sauce, eggs, and rye bread. So what part of was that meal kosher for Passover?
Not with the bread, the
No, but
rye
I could eat
bread.
it without the rye bread, right?
Yeah.
What did I have for lunch yesterday? Yesterday I had some yogurt and granola and carrots and peanut butter and chocolate. Was that kosher for Passover?
I think so. I didn't hear any bread in there.
There's some
Uh,
granola. My granola
oh,
is made
okay.
out of oats, but
Mhm.
without the granola would be okay. Right. And then for breakfast yesterday, I had potatoes and eggs. Would that be kosher for Passover?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, there we go. Fantastic. So just like with kashrut in general, and we'll get there, just like with keeping kosher in general, it's easy to find food that's kosher for Passover.
So I have a
Just about being
question.
mindful.
So you would clean that out, and for Passover, you wouldn't have it in your home or eat it.
Mhm.
But then so is that for that whole period of time until Shavuot? Or
No, so
is it just a few days and then you could have it or eat it again, I guess?
it's 7 or 8 days, depending on your custom.
Okay.
So
I
either
guess I want to say, I guess you would donate it to whoever may need food.
So there are a
And
couple of different ways to do it. One is to donate your unopened food to those in need, or to give your opened food to neighbors who might want it. Another way to do it is there's a loophole where you sell the food to somebody who's not Jewish and then buy it back at the end of the holiday.
okay.
It's a little bit of a loophole. I find it a little silly. I try to get rid of as much as I can. Absolutely. So a good way to look at getting rid of the chametz. So first is the removing the chametz from your house. So a lot of people, me included, will, starting after Purim, which is about a month before Passover, starting after Purim, you basically stop buying chametz. You kind of eat all that you have, right? So you eat all the pasta and the cereal and everything and all the bread that's in the freezer. Step 2 is cleaning everything that might touch chametz, and even the places that might not touch chametz. Let's say that you eat pita chips on the couch often, right? You'd vacuum the couch too, right? You bring, I don't know, you bring your cereal in bed. I don't know, you eat breakfast in bed sometimes, right? Wash all your sheets, that sort of thing. You look everywhere in the house. And then there's a specific process for making pots, pans, utensils, serving dishes kosher for Passover. This is the same process that we would use to if you had a home that wasn't kosher already, to make that home kosher just for any other time of the year too. And it's so it depends. It's a process of using heat. It's basically a symbolic process of using heat, either boiling a bunch of utensils in hot water or in boiling water, or using what's the word? Blowtorch, using a blowtorch to on some of the materials, or sticking it in a very hot oven. There are lots of different ways to kosher utensils and dishes, and we can go over that once we get to kashrut. And sometimes some people, instead of going through that the craziness of koshering everything, making all of their dishes kosher, they just buy a whole new set that they use just for Passover. Questions about this cleaning?
I have a question that's not about the cleaning.
Sure.
Because it's just,
this is a lot.
I guess I can't stop thinking about it. So, when Passover occurred and the babies were killed, I mean, was it then primarily Egyptian babies who
Yes.
died?
Yes.
Okay. So, so it just spread word of mouth to all the Israelites to sacrifice the lamb and place the blood, and it was just I mean, was that something that Moses was told to tell them all to do, and they did that, and then all those babies were spared?
Right, exactly. So the text goes exactly like that, where God tells Moses to tell the people X, Y, and Z and to do X, Y, and Z. And then Moses tells the people do X, Y, and Z, and they do X, Y, and Z.
Okay. And so the Egyptians didn't, and their babies weren't spared.
Exactly.
Wow.
Right. It's a terrifying story. There's no glossing over that.
I mean, I could look at it as almost a consecration or purification, even though it is terrifying and involves death and killing, but it's like the slavery and the abuse that was happening was so wrong. And it's like Moses had a heart, and God, I guess, had a heart too, to eliminate it. And so I don't know, on a deeper level, I just see that symbolically as being like a consecration, even though it's not pretty.
Right. I'm trying to see if I can find, there's a quote in that Abraham Joshua Heschel gives this great explanation about why God, here we go, why God hardens Pharaoh's heart. And I think this goes along with what you're asking as well. Hardness, so this is Abraham Joshua Heschel. Hardness of heart is a condition of which the person afflicted is unaware. Not knowing what ails him, he is unable to repent and recover. However, when hardness is intensified from above, responsibility is assumed by God. He smites and he restores, bringing about the revival of sensitivity. It seems that the only cure for willful hardness is to make it absolute. Half callousness paired with obstinate conceit seeks no cure. When hardness is complete, it becomes despair, the end of conceit. Out of despair, out of total inability to believe, prayer bursts forth. So what Heschel is basically, what he basically says is that, you know, at that point in time in Egypt, the Egyptians weren't listening to anything. Right? The Pharaoh wasn't listening to anything. And the way that Pharaoh had to learn was to get to rock bottom. He couldn't continue on with his success until he hit rock bottom. And that rock bottom meant that all of the Egyptian firstborn died.
And it was a humbling for it to, I imagine it was a humbling for him to see that he was not all powerful, that there was a power greater than him, and it was God.
Right.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. I want to go through real quickly the Passover Seder with you. And this is the Passover Seder that I used for COVID, for the Passover during COVID. And we did this as a congregation. We went through this Seder together. And there are lots of different Haggadot. There are lots of different Passover prayer books, but they all go through the same format. So this is the format, the order of the Seder. It starts out with a cup of wine or grape juice, and throughout there are going to be 4 cups of wine or grape juice. Then there's a hand washing. There's dipping of vegetables in salt water. So that's, the vegetable has to do with the lightness of spring and the green of spring, because we are in the spring season, and salt water to remember the bitter tears that we cried when we were slaves in Egypt. We break the middle matzah because we'll have 3 matzahs. We tell the story of Passover. That's the core of the experience. We wash our hands again. We bless over the matzah. And we eat some bitter herbs to remember the bitterness of slavery. We mix some bitter and some sweet together with a Hillel sandwich, which has it has charoset, which is a paste of sweet fruit and nuts and sometimes wine. We eat that together with the bitter herbs. That's our Hillel sandwich. We eat a big meal. We have dessert, and there's this wonderful activity where the kids, where the parents hide one of the pieces of matzah, and the meal isn't over until the kids in the room find that piece of matzah. Barich is the blessing after eating. Then we sing a bunch of psalms, and then we sing some more psalms. That's the basic order of the Seder. I skipped this slide. So this is in the middle on the plate is your basic Seder plate. So on the table, you're going to have karpas, which is a vegetable, beitza, which is an egg, charoset, which is that chopped fruit and nuts. Zeroa is a shank bone that the shank bone represents one of the that lamb sacrifice. The beitza also represents another sacrifice that was given at that time of year. And maror is that bitter herb, the bitterness of slavery. We also have on the table wine or grape juice for those 4 cups, matzah, salt water, and candles. And I love this little guide here because it tells you if you don't have all these items, here's what you do. Because remember how in COVID it was hard to get some things. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'll go through these one by one. That's that first cup of grape juice or wine, followed by the blessing for the first time you do anything. We say, we wash our hands, dip the greens. And because this service is so long, a lot of times it feels like there's a lot of time before dinner and people get hungry. Karpas, the dipping of the greens, is a great time to put out appetizers. We break the middle matzah, And that little piece, one little piece of that matzah will go to be hidden for the kids. We tell this story. And so here are just some of the highlights of the Passover Seder, of the way that we celebrate Passover. We have this quote: when we lift the matzah up, we say, "This is the bread of poverty and persecution that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt." Saying, hey, remember, our ancestors ate this stuff. That's why we're eating it too. As it says in the Torah, 7 days shall you eat matzot, the bread of poverty and persecution, so that you may remember that you were a slave in Egypt. And here's the wonderful part, I think. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and share the Pesach meal. This year we are still here. Next year in the land of Israel. This year we are still slaves. Next year free. So we traditionally will open the front door and say, hey, anybody who's hungry, come on in. Right? A lot of synagogues don't, or homes don't really do that anymore. I think we all should. Just ask whoever to come in. And you'll see at if you're ever invited to a Passover Seder, that there's often a hodgepodge of people there. Right? We try to collect people for our Passover Seder. Right? And that's intentional, because we're supposed to let all who are hungry come and eat. The kids at the table will ask the 4 questions. And this is to represent that all of this whole practice is about teaching our children so that they remember this story too. Another bit of texts about being slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. That's the big theme here. And then we have 4 children representing the 4 times the Torah tells us to teach our children. So we've got the wise child, wicked child, simple child, doesn't know enough to ask. And I'm going through this really quickly. Normally it's a lot longer than this. When in Torah, the people brought their first crops of the season to the temple, they would go over Jewish history or Israelite history up until that point. And so we quote that. Then we go over the 10 plagues. We sing a song. It would have been enough if God had just done a little bit, but God did a whole lot. And then we show those symbolic items on the plate. So the shank bone, the matzah, and the maror, the bitter herbs. And we finish our Magid, our storytelling section, with this statement: in every generation, each one of us must see ourselves as if we personally came out from Egypt. That quote that we were going over earlier. We were all redeemed. And then we start singing, but it's just a taste of what will come after the meal. Second cup of wine. And then we start getting ready for the meal. We wash our hands. We eat matzah. We eat bitter herbs. And we eat our Hillel sandwich. And then we eat our real meal. Questions so far? I just sped through all of that, but we're not done yet. All right. After the meal, we eat dessert, which is the afikomen. We bless after eating with that blessing after meals that you've heard us say on Saturday mornings. Third cup of wine. We invite Elijah the prophet in, because Elijah in the Jewish tradition is a symbol of the messianic age to come. And so we bring Elijah in, we pour a symbolic cup of wine for him, because we hope that he'll come in and that the Messiah will come and everything will be hunky-dory, but we're not there yet. So we sing to invite him in. We then sing some songs, drink another cup of wine, excuse me. And then we finish our service with some prayers, some songs, and the statement Lishana Haba'ah Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And what this means is not just, oh, we're going to go travel to Israel next year in a congregational trip and see all the sites, but that next year we'll be in that perfect place. We'll be in that perfect messianic era. Right? If we just remember every day that that we were slaves in Egypt and that we were free, and all of the gratitude and all of the compassion that comes with that, then we might get to that place where we're next year in Jerusalem. That's our intention for the end of the service. So I'll ask the question again that I asked earlier. Why else do you think this holiday is so important to the Jewish people? And so widely celebrated.
I almost look at it as like a refresh of the mindset of, gratitude for having been freed. I know I said it was just like a remembering, but also it's a different way of looking at it, as a freshening up, refresh of the feeling and sense of gratitude for, it's almost like a re-experiencing in a way.
Reenactment.
And a lot of different symbolic gestures.
Right. So it's a reenactment, and it's also a practice of gratitude, especially because every year that we're reenacting it, we're probably grateful for different things, and we're grateful in different ways. So we have to do it again and again and again to refresh what we're grateful for and how we see this freedom of ours. So even though this is not the central Jewish holiday, this is the central Jewish experience. And so it has become, for Jews throughout the world, it has become the central Jewish holiday.
And I'm really loving I'm loving hearing and learning about it. Like, I got emotional, like just you were talking about just some of really just the things on the plate, and it wasn't about the things on the plate. I'm just realizing that before, I think there was, like in other religions I've studied, I learned it as part of history, but it was like the supernatural piece of it, about really like what God did, why God did it, and just I want to say it was glossed over. I knew it, read it, I was in Bible school, but I don't know, I guess it's sinking in a way that is it's really powerful. And maybe just because I was ready to be here and hear it. Because like you said, it's a little scary. And so that's why it's a scary story, but it's powerful. And so I guess as an adult, in a different level of consciousness that I'm in, it's that much more meaningful.
Right. And I would imagine that next year, if you celebrate Passover next year, if you go to a Seder, you're going to think about it differently next year than you do now.
Yeah.
And every year after that.
Right. So I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for your teaching.
I'm grateful for your learning. Every time I learn this, I love this curriculum, and every time that I learn it again, I get something different about it from it because of the people. And you're the people. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Well, I will see you hopefully before next week, but I'll see you next week.
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi Sydney. Have a wonderful